Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lessons Between Lines. Today, I want to share a story that feels simple on the surface, yet carries a quiet truth many people learn too late in life. It is a story about anger, regret, and the quiet strength of calm thinking. As you listen, you will also pick up new English words and see how they are used naturally in a story. Learning English does not have to feel heavy or stressful. Sometimes, the best lessons come when we simply listen and reflect. Long ago, in a distant kingdom surrounded by wide fields and gentle hills, there lived a young king named David. David became king at the age of 25, far earlier than he had ever expected. His father had passed away suddenly, leaving the crown on the head of a man who was still learning who he was and what kind of leader he wanted to become. Throughout his childhood and youth, David had been guided by a wise teacher named Edward. Edward was more than a tutor. He taught David how the world worked, but more importantly, he taught him how the human heart worked. He spoke often about patience, kindness, and the danger of letting emotions rule decisions. After the king's death, Edward remained by David's side, serving as the kingdom's chief minister and his most trusted advisor. For a time, the kingdom prospered. Crops grew well, trade was steady, and people believed the young king would bring a bright future. David relied heavily on Edward's calm voice, especially when difficult choices had to be made. Then, one year, everything changed. A severe food crisis struck the land. The harvest failed, stores of grain grew low, and fear began to spread among the people. The crisis had begun with a mistake in a weather forecast, a mistake Edward himself had made. Though unintentional, the error led to serious consequences, and the pressure on the young king became unbearable. Surrounded by worried advisors and angry voices, David felt his chest tighten with frustration. Fear turned into anger, and anger clouded his judgment. Without pausing to reflect, without listening to the lessons Edward had taught him for years, David made a decision in the heat of emotion. He ordered Edward, his own mentor and guide, to leave the kingdom and never return. Edward did not argue. He did not defend himself or remind the king of their past. With a heavy heart, he bowed, accepted the command, and quietly left the palace behind. In a single moment of anger, a lifetime of trust was broken. Edward traveled far from the capital and eventually settled in a small, distant village. Though he still possessed wealth and knowledge, he chose a simple life as a farmer. He worked the land alongside the villagers, sharing their struggles and listening to their worries. Over time, the people began to respect him deeply. They came to him for advice on farming, family conflicts, and difficult decisions. Edward never claimed to be wise. He simply listened, thought carefully, and spoke calmly. Back in the kingdom, David soon felt the weight of his decision. Without Edward's guidance, every choice felt heavier. Problems seemed more complex, and solutions less clear. At night, regret crept into his thoughts. Slowly, he realized that he had acted not as a wise king, but as an angry man. Determined to correct his mistake, David sent soldiers across the land to search for Edward. Days passed, then weeks, but no one could find him. The kingdom was vast, and Edward had disappeared without a trace. One evening, David remembered a lesson Edward had once taught him. True wisdom often reveals itself through actions, not words. Inspired by this thought, the king devised a plan. He ordered his soldiers to send a letter and a clay jar to the leader of every village in the kingdom. The letter demanded that each village return the jar within a month, filled with wisdom. If they failed, the jar must instead be filled with precious jewels. Confusion spread quickly. No one understood how wisdom could be placed inside a jar. When the letter reached the village where Edward lived, the village leader rushed to him for guidance. Edward listened quietly as fear filled the room. The villagers had no jewels, and punishment from the king seemed inevitable. Edward looked at their anxious faces and spoke gently. He told them not to panic and asked for the jar. He promised it would be returned, filled with wisdom by the end of the month. When asked how he planned to do this, Edward simply smiled and said that time often brings solutions when the mind remains calm. Days later, while working on his farm, Edward noticed a small pumpkin vine growing near his field. An idea slowly formed. Carefully, he placed a tiny pumpkin inside the jar without cutting it from the vine. Each day, he watered it patiently. The pumpkin grew little by little, pressing against the glass until it filled the entire jar. When it was fully grown, Edward cut the vine, leaving the pumpkin sealed inside. The jar was sent back to the palace. When King David received it, he stared in amazement. A pumpkin had grown perfectly inside the jar, impossible to remove. He smiled, understanding immediately. This was not a trick, it was a lesson. Growing something like this required patience, foresight, and calm thinking. Only one man in the kingdom could have done this. Without delay, David set out himself to find Edward. When they finally met, David bowed his head, ashamed. He apologized sincerely, admitting his mistake and acknowledging the wisdom he had once ignored. The story ends not with punishment, but with understanding. Because the greatest lesson is this: decisions made in anger often lead to regret, while solutions born from calm thinking lead to wisdom. When emotions rise, clarity falls. But when the mind is peaceful, even the most difficult problems can be solved. Through this story, we learn that wisdom cannot be forced. It grows slowly, with patience and understanding, just like the pumpkin inside the jar. Thank you for listening to Lessons Between Lines. If this story helped you reflect, improve your English, or see life from a new perspective, please like, comment, and share. Your support helps this channel grow, and I'll see you in the next story.